granddaughter is here, Emma Olivia Wildcat. And I wanted her to be here because she was asked, Grandpa, what do? You're doing all the, you're always traveling, and I see these books laying around. So I said, well, Emma, you come today and you'll get a taste of what your grandpa does. But that's our future leaders. We might think about that at some point. How do we get the youth engaged in some of this work? I think it's so critically important. So, yes, we're grateful to be here, and this is just the beginning of a discussion. We're going to have more discussions, and we're looking for partners and collaborators. We need to engage indigenous knowledge holders now more than ever. I happen to think that indigenous voices may be some of the most important voices for us to listen to this century. Why? We never thought in boxes, and we never worked in silos, and that's a benefit. That is a benefit to how we understand our relationship to the world. And I think we share so much in common with many of you, too. We have, as His Serene Highness has pointed out just last year, we have that common vision. We do have, after all, I'm going to speak to you, we're going to speak to you today as relatives, your distant relatives, I admit. But make no mistake about it. We are related in a fundamental way. After all, we are all children of this Mother Earth. And that's something we need to really think deeply about what that means at this point in time. So that's the way we always convene our meetings. We talk as relatives to each other. And if I have a chance at the end, I'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages of speaking as relatives to each other. Of course, that notion of relatives applies also in many of our indigenous worldviews, such as my Zoyaha worldview, to different than human relatives, plant relatives, fish relatives, animal relatives. And there's nothing romantic about that if you think about it. I mean, isn't that what modern evolutionary science tells us? We're all related. And I think we have tremendous wisdom and insight to share. So this is just a first discussion. I know time is short, so I had some slides to show. I guess I should at least put up one of those. There you go. I started talking just very quickly. This is a kind of a map of an image we made. So this is our hub. The hub is located in Lawrence, Kansas. Everyone was wondering, well, how did you have a hub in the middle of the continental United States? Haskell Indian Nations University, any given semester, will have over 700, 800, up to 900 students pre-COVID. We're building back up again since COVID. But 900 indigenous students from over 100 federally recognized indigenous tribes in the United States, and usually anywhere from 40 to 45 of the states of the United States of America. It is the United Nations of Indigenous Higher Education in the United States. And we have a lot of coastal peoples, indigenous peoples. So it made sense to put this national hub, the center, in the center of the United States, and then work with all of our great relatives here throughout. You can see the U.S. and its territory. So I just wanted to share that image to kind of give you a notion. We just finished one of our big meetings, our annual hub meeting. I think we had, 60-some partners that came to the National Center for Atmospheric Research, where they hosted us for our second hub meeting. And in the fall, we had our first hub meeting at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. And we had about, again, similar number. Total, I think now we're up to 72 partners and 17 institutional partners like NOAA, like NCAR, Scripps Oceanic Institute. And so it's a big undertaking. It's the biggest challenge of my life, but it's also the most exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn the podium over here to Jennifer, Dr. Santos. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dan. If someone can put up my slides.
There you go. You just hit the green arrow. I think it should come up, maybe. We'll see. just go ahead and
I
start
can
talking.
just begin while
Yeah.
they pop it up. Thank you for the invitation, Your Serene Highness. I'm Jennifer Santos from the University of Puerto Rico. I was born and raised in the island, and I had the opportunity of doing my master's and my PhD at the University of Delaware. I'm a sociologist by training and a disaster researcher. Awesome, so it's moving. Great. So again, as I said, I'm a sociologist, and I had the privilege of having my training at the Disaster Research Center, which is the oldest research center in the world devoted to the social aspects of disasters. So a lot of what I do, it's really trying to understand the broader impacts of disasters and how we socially produce the catastrophic outcomes that we often see. In terms of research, as you all may know, Puerto Rico has been dealing with several back-to-back disasters: Hurricane Maria in 2017, the swarm of earthquakes in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic. So that really challenges how we do disaster research. Disaster research is usually event-focused. In the current scenario, and as we think about climate change, we're really talking about the cumulative effects of disasters. And one of the things that is particularly important is how we communicate with people about risk and about how they can prepare themselves and their communities to really take on protective actions. A lot of times, this work is really done by inviting an expert to the table who gives recommendations that are not really evidence-based, just based on prior experience. So a lot of what I've been doing, it's really trying to facilitate collaborations between academia, the government at the state and federal level, and also communities. And a lot of the challenge when we do that, it's really bringing everyone to the table. So a lot of what we do is thinking about engagement and how we can really improve science by bringing to the table the people that are going to use the science that we produce. In the aftermath of the earthquakes in 2020, I was called as one of those experts to talk about risk in Puerto Rico, and I very kindly accepted the invitation, helped the United States Geological Survey, but also had the conversation of we really need to rethink how we do risk communication and how we bring people to the table. So with that conversation, we've been doing research, field research in Puerto Rico in 3 communities to understand how people use risk communication products, specifically the earthquake aftershock forecast. It's a product that the USGS generates, and it allows them to think and provide information about the probabilities of an earthquake or an aftershock in the future. And one of the things that we have been working with that product is how well it captures the experience of those that are dealing with these earthquakes. So for instance, a very succinct example of that is that the product, when we started working with the USGS, said that magnitude 3 earthquakes could not be felt. But people that live close to the epicenter, because these are shallow earthquakes, are actually feeling them. So it's very important that when we talk to people and we provide this information, we also acknowledge and recognize their experiences so that when they see this information, they feel that their experience is represented in the work that we are producing. So this is just a little bit of our conceptual model looking at those cumulative effects of disasters and how people make decisions. And a little bit of an idea of the situation there in terms of the number of earthquakes that have been occurring in southwest Puerto Rico, is also one of the poorest areas in the island. So it's that intersection of the hazards with population in a socially produced condition of vulnerability. So we worked there, and we are continuing working luckily through Rising Voices, to provide support to these communities and really work hand in hand with them to think about planning. One of the challenges that we have in the US is that there's this whole discourse on whole community planning, but when we talk to residents about whether they want to engage in this type of activities, they're not really interested. So we really had to think about engagement and who's at the table and who's not at the table, and how we can use our social science methods to really have a sense of what people are thinking, how they're making decisions, what are the challenges that they're facing, and how we can really enhance local capacity so that they, we talk about communities being first responders, but we really don't operationalize what that will mean, and we lose the opportunity of building capacity in the aftermath of disasters. So this is some of the work that we do in terms of preparing to go to the field. A lot of this is not really unique. It's the tradition of the Disaster Research Center of doing quick response research in the aftermath of disasters to get a sense of what's happening in that very immediate aftermath of events and to understand the outcomes that we are seeing. We also, when we think about building alliances, it's very important that we bring to the table different actors at different levels and that we maintain those good relationships. One of the things that we try to work very hard on is to avoid adversarial relationships. We really don't need to be in a legal battle. We are kins, we are citizens of the same community, so we really had to facilitate these dialogues. And this is one of the questions that we did in one of the surveys that we administered that really highlights the challenge that we faced when we think about planning. We really talk about doing all this effort of community planning, but we are in an individualistic culture. When you get out of work, you go home, we watch TV, but you're not really gonna gather with your neighbors to think about disasters. So that's one of the challenges that we have. We really have to think about how we transform our culture so that we are really talking about a culture of preparedness. And why this is all important, ultimately, we are all part of society. And I think that one of the biggest threats is how we carry on our social contract. We're failing our fellow citizens when we don't acknowledge their experiences and we really don't think about solutions to really help them. And it's not just about how many people die in disasters or how many people are destroyed. It's also about how many people, their spirits, die in disasters. So we really have to think about solutions, and we really have to think about how we treat others and how we think about the experiences of others. So I know we're short on time. I'm going to pass it on to Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie. Yes. So as you've heard a little bit about Leslie, she has an incredible heritage in Hawaii and brings incredible wealth of indigenous Hawaiian knowledge to our team in this project. Leslie?
Well, that's too kind of you. Aloha mai kako, o Leslie Iaukea, ko o inoa na Maui Maiau, a me ahupua o Honuaula. Greetings, my name is Leslie Iaukea. I know it's a hard name to pronounce, but I am from the island of Maui in Hawaii. I'd like to first thank Your Serene Highness. It is a privilege to meet you and to be in your company. It's also a privilege to be here in Monaco. Who would ever thought a Hawaiian girl would be here in Monaco? And of course I had to drag my mother here with me. So she's 2 rows back and crying at this point. It is a great pleasure though. Living on an island chain teaches us that our natural world is a gift with limits and that we must carefully steward this gift if we are to survive together. Oh, awesome. As we work to protect cultural and environmental resources for our children's future, our Pacific voyaging traditions teach us to venture beyond the horizon and to connect and learn with others. We are experiencing a time in history in which to pivot and join together worldviews, as our mission is to converge indigenous knowledge with modern science. It is about engaging with our communities first, as we bridge together traditional and new technologies. I'll make sure I talk faster. As you may already know, indigenous peoples are among the first to face the direct consequences of climate change, even though indigenous peoples contribute little to greenhouse emissions. It is in our communities that notice the change in weather, oceans, seasons, and calendars, as their daily lives are informed by the relationships between man and ocean, man and land. In moving forward to possible solutions to climate change and sustainability issues, there is an emphasis on sharing and learning from each other in order to create global relationships and collaborations in our effort to care for the oceans. Our focus here today is on people and coastlines and oceans. So real quick, I'll go over the coastal resilience, and then I think together we can talk about indigenous law, and we can have that roundtable discussion. Okay. In understanding coastal resilience, there are some examples in every community that encourage the people to adapt and mitigate a different pathway leading forward. Indigenous knowledge and a different worldview change that dialogue and may help society at large to cope with impending changes, thereby finding possible solutions through another lens. In Hawaii, our oceans have high levels of contamination in certain areas where there are runoffs from the land. Our overall air temperature has increased since mid-century by 2.3 degrees. The heating of the oceans have occurred, killing off the reefs, loss of biodiversity, loss of sustenance and traditional practices, and loss of fisheries. The sea level rise in Hawaii is 1 to 6 inches every 4 years, and shoreline erosion, saltwater, contamination of drinking water, increased vulnerability to storm damage affects our agriculture and our forestry, and stresses on ecosystems are prevalent in everyday life. Let's also include the hurricane season, tsunami season, big wave season, we just had it. The Eddy did go. Flooding, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions throughout the year. Just to add a mix to the craziness. And when you do, then there's a lot to talk about. Coastal resilience is about becoming innovative and creative in finding solutions and putting together a plan. It becomes our responsibility to be the stewards of our future that allow us to build a resilient future together. Our Hawaiian community teaches us how to apply traditional knowledge to solve problems of resource management as coastlines support the fisheries, protect us from storms, and help us store carbon to help mitigate climate change. In these spaces, there is a need for a shared vision, common values, and community. Recent studies show that 74% of the world's population lives within 50 kilometers to the coast. Therefore, this issue is not just our issue, it is all of our issue. We've become pretty proactive in Hawaii, where we focus on short-term solutions and long-term solutions. Bet you're waiting for that to change. Short-term solutions, I won't read them all. There is a lot here. It was a group of us from around the state that came together, government officials, culture practitioners, PhDs from a university, all of us got together and we put down what are the short-term solutions that we can take care of right now and that we need to focus on. And so, just to name a few, it's to consider Native Hawaiian traditional knowledge and practices in planning for the impacts of climate change. And what that means is someone from the Native Hawaiian community needs to be at that table for the planning. Number 2, encourage community stewardship groups and local stakeholders to participate in planning and implementation of climate change policies. Number 3 is to encourage the preservation and restoration of natural landscape features, such as coral reefs, beaches and dunes, forest streams, floodplains, and wetlands. They have the inherent capacity to avoid, minimize, or mitigate the aspects of climate change. 4, to explore adaptation strategies that moderate harm or exploit beneficial opportunities in response to actual or expected climate change impacts to the natural and built environment. As we're going down the list, is to 5 minutes. And for an example of what we saw as a short-term solution, we looked at the Ahupua'a system. And that is a revitalization of the system that was once when our ancestors existed. It's a land system which is a section of the land that runs from the mountain to the sea, and the size of that Ahupua'a was dependent on the resources within that area. So to really go narrow and focus on what we're looking at, The ahupua'a was thought of as the basic self-sustaining unit and emphasized the interrelationship of the elements that would be of nature and the beings that would be of the humans. Long-term solutions, of course, support sustainability and resilient land use. As we're going through this list, you can see what they are. Protect nearshore water quality, develop innovative and sustainable financing and incentives, and so forth. And an example for the long term would be to protect marine national monuments. So in Hawaii, we have the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, which is actually recognized today. And that was a big concern for us to protect those waters, the fisheries, and the ecosystem that then leads down to the chain of Hawaii. Other ways of mitigating and adapting would be our hub. So I've been with Rising Voices for 10 years with Dan. It's been a pleasure. A bunch of us got together to write this abstract for the next phase, which is our hub that we're going to be doing this past year. And it's just been a great space and place to be yourself as a Native person, a Native scientist, to come to the plate and to be with one another, free of any colonial or marginalization in thought. And so in understanding these times we have to integrate and converge different worldviews. The converging together of the minds highlights indigenous knowledge by understanding the underlying change and prediction of future changes to the weather. The data will come out of this transdisciplinary analysis and convergent findings and will enhance fundamental understandings of an adaptive and resilient response to the interconnected physical, cultural, social, and economic process that results in climate change, and the indigenous knowledge will increase the accuracy, relevance, and usability of model predictions on multi-decadal timescales, which will highlight the changes and possible solutions. So this is what we're working on for our hub right now. And as one of the co-PIs with Dan, it's been a privilege. I'm also the recipient of the funds where I am going to start my own program. And it then goes off of my residential curriculum that I used for the worldwide voyage on Hokulea. So as a crew member on the voyaging canoe for Hokulea, I co-authored the curriculum for students to follow us around the world for 4 years. And we have over 100,000 students that followed us. So by adding culture, by adding something that the students are attracted to, that can relate to, that fits within their household of traditions and language, it brought everyone out from everywhere to come and see us. And the change was our crew, our navigators, our leaders wanted that to happen for the first time since Hokulea existed. And so the change of the mind, the philosophy of all in this together, was really what brought us all together. So there were so many people involved that we needed to have something for them to do. So I had to do this curriculum, and it led me to my PhD. And it then led me to the hub. And now we will be starting a 4-week residential Indigenous Knowledge and Earth and Environmental Convergent Science program out of the East-West Center and University of Hawaii. Trying to talk really fast, but basically it's about community, it's about teaching Native people how to be scientists, it's about teaching them the foundations in culture and tradition. It's about teaching them that we must go to the source, go to the people, we must be hands-on in the field. At the same time, we can go back to our labs and do our research. The fact is that as Native Hawaiians, we can be scientists. I'm a geospatial scientist today, and we do exist. And that didn't exist about 10 years ago. So to see that we can now put this to work, teach our children that we do exist, and that they can come along and change and take care of the ocean and work in conservation, it's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to stop right here.
Well, I think
I'm talking too fast.
No, this is one of the difficulties you have, particularly if you come from the Midwestern United States. I'm talking very fast now.